They told me I was too old, too fragile, that I couldn't care for myself anymore. But what they really meant was I was no longer useful to them. My son and his wife decided my fate, banishing me to a nursing home as if I were a problem to be discarded. But as my old life was packed away, I unearthed a secret that would force them to confront the true cost of their cruel neglect. Before we jump back in, don't forget to subscribe while you're listening, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now, take a breath and listen closely. This is my story. They told me I was too old, too fragile, that I couldn't care for myself anymore. But what they really meant was I was no longer useful to them. The living room, usually a haven of quiet contentment, felt like a stage under the harsh afternoon sun. Dust motes danced in the thick light, illuminating the worn armchair where I sat. A spotlight on Stephen and Brenda opposite me. Stephen sat stiffly on the sofa's edge, his crisp shirt doing little to hide the unnatural tension in his shoulders. Between us, Mom, Stephen's voice was too soft, too rehearsed. Brenda and I have had many discussions about your well-being. Brenda nodded, her eyes glued to Robert's antique mantel clock, its rhythmic tick now a countdown. Every tick echoed the ending I hadn't prepared for. We think it's time for you to consider a nursing home. The words didn't roar. They dropped like stones, each ripple expanding, consuming the sunlit room. My breath hitched. A nursing home. The phrase tasted like ash. Not a gentle offer, but a sentence. A place for the discarded, for those they wanted to forget. My hands, steady moments before, now gripped the armchair's worn velvet, rough against suddenly trembling fingers. A nursing home? My voice was barely a whisper. Why? I'm capable. I manage this home, cook, clean. I tend the rose garden Stephen loved as a boy. I searched his eyes, pleading for a flicker of memory. Had he forgotten the bookkeeper who'd worked double shifts? The mother who poured her every penny into his education, into a future brighter than her own? Stephen cleared his throat, glancing at Brenda. It's not capability, Mum. It's safety. This house is big. You're alone. What if you fall? Forget the stove? His words, a rush of carefully chosen anxieties, sliced at my dignity. Each phrase was a tiny, insidious cut, designed to make me doubt my own independence. He had learned this somewhere, this quiet, clinical way of dismantling a person's spirit. Brenda's voice, crisp and unfeeling, sliced through the quiet. We just want what's best for you, Meredith. It's for your own good. We've visited Serenity Gardens, excellent reviews, nurses 24/7. You wouldn't be alone anymore. Alone. The word, meant to soothe, felt like a cruel irony. I had my routines, the hum of a life built with love. Yet facing their cold, unwavering conviction, I was terrifyingly solitary. My mind reeled, grasping for a defense, for words that would pierce their composure. Nothing came. My voice, trapped, burned with a suffocating wave of pain. Humiliation scalded my cheeks. They had planned this, discussed it, decided my fate. Without me. They'd already picked the place, as if I were an old appliance, ready for the junk heap. We just want you to be comfortable, Mom, Stephen repeated, reaching for my hand. I flinched back, pulling away like from a live wire. The gesture felt hollow, a desperate attempt to soften a blow that had already landed. Comfortable. In a sterile room, my past reduced to a photograph. My stomach clenched. This wasn't comfort. It was control. The ultimate, calculated betrayal from the very people I had given everything to. The cold tile floor beneath my slippers became an icy slab, mirroring the dread creeping through my veins. The clock's tick, now deafening, filled the silence, amplifying my shattered trust. They watched, waiting for me to nod, to comply, as always. But in that agonizing quiet, as their faces remained unreadable, something within me cracked, not shattered, but realigned. I had given and given. They had taken and taken. Now, they tried to erase my very existence. How many times does a mother sacrifice her own life before she realizes she's become a ghost in her own story? The scent of sterile disinfectant and stale linen replaced the familiar comfort of roses and old wood, a cruel, immediate marker of my new reality. Just 2 days after Stephen and Brenda's pronouncement, a small white van pulled into my driveway. I watched from behind the lace curtains, a ghost in my own home, as 2 men in blue uniforms efficiently loaded my life into boxes. There was no fanfare, no goodbye from Stephen or Brenda. They had sent a nurse from Serenity Gardens, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, who spoke in hushed tones, as if I were already fading. She kept patting my arm, a gesture meant to soothe, but which only amplified my sense of powerlessness. Each box carried out was a piece of me, ripped from its moorings. The old armchair where I had sat for decades, now empty, seemed to hold its breath. The drive to Serenity Gardens was short, yet it felt like a passage to another world. The building itself was a sprawling, beige fortress, its windows uniformly dark, reflecting the grey sky. Inside, the air hummed with the quiet efficiency of institutional life, the distant clatter of meal trays, the soft scuff of rubber-soled shoes on polished floors, a low murmur of voices from a common room. My new room was small, a single bed, a dresser, a small, cold window looking out onto a perfectly manicured lawn that felt utterly alien. No rose garden, just neat rows of trimmed bushes. "Here we are, Meredith," Sarah said, her voice bright, almost forced. "Your new home." She gestured to the empty space as if it were a grand palace. I stood in the center of the room, my small suitcase at my feet, the only personal item they had allowed me to bring immediately. The silence pressed in, heavier than any I had known in my own house. Here, it was the silence of forgotten lives, of empty days stretching ahead. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This was it. This was where I would slowly disappear. The first few days blurred into a monotonous rhythm of bland meals, forced socialization, and the constant, subtle surveillance of the staff. Every moment felt prescribed, every choice removed. I saw other residents, some lost in their own worlds, others staring blankly at the television, their eyes mirroring the profound emptiness I felt inside. Was this my future? To sit, to wait, to be slowly, politely extinguished. The thought was a chilling echo in the hollow chambers of my heart. Stephen and Brenda called once, a strained, brief conversation that offered no real comfort, only superficial inquiries about my adjustment. They didn't come to visit. The lilies Stephen had brought to my house were likely wilting by now, a fitting symbol of their hollow gesture. One afternoon, a trolley arrived outside my door, piled high with boxes, my belongings. A wave of unexpected emotion washed over me, not joy, but a deep, aching sadness. These were the remnants of my life, unceremoniously dumped here. I watched the orderlies stack them against the wall, impersonal and efficient. Among them was an antique wooden box, not large, but heavy, its brass clasps gleaming faintly. Robert had given it to me on our 5th anniversary, a trinket box, he'd called it. I hadn't thought to bring it in my small suitcase. With a strange mixture of dread and longing, I began to unpack. Each item was a memory, a whisper from a life that now felt impossibly distant. An old photograph of Robert and me on our wedding day, his smile wide, my hand in his. A faded recipe card for his favorite apple pie, written in my mother's elegant script. And then, at the very bottom of a box filled with old scarves and forgotten trinkets, my fingers brushed against the smooth, cool surface of the wooden box. I lifted it out, placing it gently on the small dresser. Its familiar weight in my hands was a small anchor in the turbulent waters of my despair. I ran my thumb over the intricate carvings on its lid, remembering Robert's proud smile as he handed it to me. "For your secrets, my love," he had whispered. I hadn't opened it in years, the memories it held too precious, too painful. But now, in this stark, impersonal room, a sudden, desperate urge compelled me. I unlatched the brass clasps, the faint click echoing in the quiet room. Inside, nestled amongst dried lavender and a few old letters, was a small, tightly rolled parchment. It was yellowed with age, brittle to the touch. My heart gave a strange little lurch. I unrolled it carefully, the paper crackling softly. It was a map. Not a grand, detailed map of a city or a country, but a crude, hand-drawn sketch, marked with symbols and a few faded words. Old Willow, North Ridge, Bear's Claw Creek, and scrawled in the bottom corner, a single, undeniable phrase: gold mine. My own handwriting, from decades ago. I remembered it then. A foolish childhood adventure. A day spent playing prospector in the woods behind my grandparents' old farmhouse. We'd found a glimmer of something, bright and metallic, and in our youthful excitement, we had convinced ourselves it was gold. I had drawn this map, a childish treasure chart. I tucked it back into the box, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. Stephen and Brenda thought they knew everything about me, about my life. They thought I was old, useless, that my world was shrinking to the four walls of this room. But what they didn't know was that some secrets, like seeds, lay dormant for decades, waiting for the right moment to bloom. And this small, forgotten map was about to change everything. Would they ever imagine what a simple piece of paper could unleash? The map lay in my trembling hand, not a child's forgotten fantasy, but a sudden, shocking spark in the suffocating stillness of my room. I stared at the yellowed parchment, the crude lines and faded words: Old Willow, North Ridge, Bear's Claw Creek, bringing back a flood of memories from decades ago. I was barely 10, Robert not yet in the picture. My grandfather, a man who always saw adventure in the mundane, had taken me to the woods behind his old farm. We'd found a small vein of something gleaming, a metallic shimmer in the damp earth. In my youthful awe, I'd declared it a gold mine. Grandpa had indulged me, letting me sketch this very map, promising it was our secret treasure. I remembered the thrill, the naive belief that wealth could be found simply by digging up a bit of sparkling rock. That's all it had ever been. A sweet, innocent memory, a childish game. I traced the faded ink, a ghost of a smile touching my lips, then fading. This map, this remnant of a simpler time, had no place in the sterile, air-conditioned confines of Serenity Gardens. It was a fragment of a life that felt utterly severed. I closed my eyes, the weight of my new reality pressing in. But as I sat there, the map still in my hand, a different kind of memory surfaced. Not of my childhood, but of fragments of conversations, whispers from Stephen and Brenda. Their failing business, Stephen's hushed calls about mounting losses, Brenda's worried lines about bank loans. Their high-tech manufacturing company, the one Robert had helped Stephen get started, was teetering on the brink. They had always been vague about the details, but I knew enough to piece together their desperation. Stephen, in a rare moment of vulnerability, had once mentioned they were struggling to source some obscure raw materials, something about circuits and advanced electronics. He'd even casually remarked how difficult it was to compete with overseas suppliers for these specialized components. He didn't know I remembered. I always listened, even when they thought I wasn't. My eyes snapped open, returning to the map. Gold mine. The words suddenly shimmered with a new, unsettling possibility. What if the gold wasn't gold at all? The area around my grandfather's farm, that entire region, had undergone significant geological surveys in later years. I remembered fleeting news reports, local buzz about new mineral discoveries. Not gold, but something else. Rare earth minerals, essential for modern technology. Semiconductors, electronics, the very components Stephen's business desperately needed. A shiver, not of cold, but of a strange, potent excitement, ran down my spine. The naive childhood dream transformed into a sharp, calculated realization. That gold mine wasn't just a nostalgic relic, it was a potential solution, a hidden vein of something truly valuable that could save or ruin their entire future. They thought I was a burden, a useless old woman ready for the quiet oblivion of a nursing home. They had no idea that the very thing they craved, the answer to their mounting financial woes, might be tied to a secret I had unknowingly carried for decades. The thought was intoxicating, a forbidden fruit offered to a woman starved of power. My mind, usually cluttered with anxieties about my new surroundings, sharpened. The sterile air of the room, the distant hum of the nursing station, faded into the background. All that mattered was the map, and the knowledge it now represented. This wasn't about simple revenge. This was about justice. It was about teaching them that true value lies not in discarding those who have given everything, but in recognizing the hidden strengths within them. A quiet, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. Stephen and Brenda, consumed by their own financial anxieties, would be desperate. The lure of wealth, even whispered, would draw them out of their self-absorption. They'd abandon their casual neglect. This little map, a child's plaything, was about to become my ultimate weapon. I folded the map carefully, tucking it back into the antique box. I wasn't just an old woman waiting to fade. I was the keeper of a secret that could either save their legacy or expose their greed for all the world to see. And they wouldn't see it coming. How do you find the courage to play a game you never knew you were in, especially when the stakes are your dignity? The antique box, nestled beneath my pillow, felt like a silent, pulsing heart, holding the secret that now fueled my every breath. Days at Serenity Gardens, once a monotonous blur, sharpened into a stage where I could observe, calculate, and finally, act. The staff still moved with their quiet, efficient steps. The other residents still drifted in their routines. But my perception had shifted. My small room, once a prison, became a strategic outpost. The map, carefully folded, was my blueprint. It was a Tuesday when Stephen and Brenda finally called. Not a visit, of course, but a call from Stephen's office. The phone buzzed on the bedside table, its synthetic ring a jarring contrast to the subtle hum of the facility. I let it ring twice before answering. A small, almost imperceptible delay. "Hello?" My voice, calm and steady, surprised even myself. "Mom? Good, you picked up?" Stephen's voice, distorted slightly by the phone, carried a hint of impatience. "Just checking in. How are things? Settling in all right?" The usual superficial pleasantries, delivered like a checklist. Brenda's voice was a faint echo in the background, likely multitasking, her attention elsewhere. "Oh, I'm fine, Stephen," I replied, a lightness in my tone that was entirely new. "Just fine. Actually, I've been doing a bit of sorting. Going through some old things. You know, clearing out the clutter." I paused, letting the words hang. "Found that old wooden box your father gave me. The one with the carvings." A beat of silence. Then Stephen's voice, a shade more attentive. "Oh? That old thing? What did you find in it? More of Dad's old army medals?" He was already dismissing it, associating it with sentimentality, not substance. This was my opening. "No, not medals this time," I said, a deliberate softness in my voice. "Something unexpected. A map, actually. A very old map. I'd almost forgotten about it. From when I was a girl, playing in the woods behind Grandpa's farm." I let out a soft, nostalgic sigh, as if lost in a sweet memory. It was our little secret. We thought we'd found a gold mine. There was a distinct shift on Stephen's end. A pause. Longer this time. Devoid of his usual hurried energy. I could almost picture him, pausing mid-email, his brow furrowing. "A gold mine, Mum? Are you feeling all right? You know, those old childhood fantasies?" His tone was still dismissive, but laced with a new, subtle thread of curiosity. Brenda, now, seemed to have stopped her background murmuring. "Oh, perfectly fine, darling. My mind's never been clearer," I assured him, allowing a faint chuckle to escape. "Just a silly childhood memory. But it was quite the adventure at the time. We really believed it. I left it there, a seed planted, a hint of something intriguing, yet easily dismissed as an old woman's fancy. Well, I just wanted to say hello. Give Brenda my love. Yeah, you too, Mom. I'll tell her. Good to hear from you. The line clicked dead. I lowered the phone, a slow smile spreading across my face. He had taken the bait. Not entirely, not yet, but the seed was there, watered by his inherent greed, his desperate search for solutions to their financial plight. In the following days, I became a quiet observer. I watched for any change in their patterns, any new question when they called. Stephen's calls, once perfunctory, now held a new, almost imperceptible undercurrent. He'd bring up his business, not directly, but through veiled complaints about market shortages, impossible supply chains, and the cutthroat competition for rare materials. He was laying the groundwork, probing. One afternoon, a week after my initial hint, Brenda called. Her voice, usually so clipped and precise, was unusually warm. Meredith, dear, just wanted to see how you were truly settling in. Stephen and I have been so worried. Worried? The word felt like a lie. And you mentioned a map? From your grandfather's farm? It sounds quite charming. Her casual tone couldn't hide the calculated inquiry. She was fishing. Oh, it is, Brenda, I hummed, sketching idly on a notepad. Just a quaint little drawing? Nothing important, really. Childhood whimsy. You know how children are, finding treasure in every shiny rock. I played down the gold, letting her imagination do the work. The beauty of their greed was its boundless nature. They would fill in the blanks themselves. Right, Brenda said, a slight hesitation in her voice. But a mine, you said? Your grandfather's farm? Wasn't that area developed later? Perhaps some old family stories were passed down? She pressed, gently, testing the waters. Goodness, I wouldn't know, dear. I was just a child. All I remember is the excitement of discovering something glittering, I replied, my tone airy. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. The calculation of potential against effort, still. It reminds me of how resourceful people used to be. Not like now, where everyone struggles just to find what they need for their businesses. I let that last sentence hang, a subtle barb aimed at their known financial struggles. The calls continued, becoming more frequent, their tone increasingly solicitous. Stephen brought me a small, expensive box of chocolates, an almost unheard-of gesture. Brenda sent a thoughtful card. They still hadn't visited, but their voices, once distant, now buzzed with an artificial warmth, a forced attentiveness. They were circling, their hunger for what they thought was hidden becoming palpable. It was beautiful to witness, this slow unraveling of their true motives, their self-interest blossoming into full view. How much would the promise of riches make them change? And how far would they go to uncover a truth they believed would solve all their problems? They thought a few forced smiles and token gifts would unlock my secrets, but I knew their sudden attentiveness was merely the glint of their own reflection in my whispered gold. The days at Serenity Gardens transformed from a muted waiting room to a cunning game board. Stephen and Brenda, once content with perfunctory phone calls, now made weekly visits. Their faces, once strained with dismissive pity, now bore an eager, almost predatory cheer. They brought small bouquets, boxes of gourmet chocolates, even a new cashmere shawl Brenda insisted I needed. Each gesture, however grand, felt transactional, a thinly veiled attempt to pry. "Mom, this facility is just lovely," Brenda chirped one afternoon, her eyes scanning my small room as if searching for hidden compartments. She perched on the edge of the guest chair, her designer handbag clutched in her lap. "So peaceful. Are you enjoying the bingo? Stephen and I were just saying, it's so important for you to be happy here." "Oh, I'm perfectly content, dear," I replied, sipping my tea, my gaze steady. Plenty of time to reflect and to remember. I paused, letting the word remember hang in the air like a delicate bait. It's funny, The things that come back to you when you have nothing but time. Like that old farmhouse. Grandpa was so convinced we'd found something extraordinary in those woods. Stephen, pacing by the window, stopped abruptly. His shoulders tensed. Right, the gold mine, Mom. You mentioned that. Any more details surface by chance? Just curious. His voice was carefully casual, but his knuckles were white where he gripped his phone. I smiled, a slow, almost imperceptible curve of my lips. Oh, just fragments, Stephen. Flashes, really. I remember Grandpa always had a particular way of talking about the Earth, about geological veins. He'd say, "Meredith, the Earth speaks in riddles, but sometimes, if you listen closely, it gives up its secret." He was quite eccentric, bless his heart. I stirred my tea, giving them a moment to chew on that. I recall something about a specific kind of reddish rock, near where the Bear's Claw Creek bends sharply. Said it was a good indicator. Brenda scribbled something on a small notepad she pulled from her bag. Her brow furrowed in concentration. Reddish rock, Bear's Claw Creek bend. Got it. She glanced up, her forced smile back in place. You're just full of fascinating stories, Meredith. So much history. Indeed. I agreed, my eyes twinkling. And some history, it seems, has a way of repeating itself, or revealing itself, when least expected. I let the double meaning hang, watching their eyes gleam with a mixture of hope and frustration. They wanted precise coordinates, but I would give them only whispers, riddles. Over the next 2 weeks, their visits intensified. Stephen started coming alone sometimes, bringing takeout coffee, trying to engage me in man-to-man talks about the pressures of business, how close their company was to a breakthrough, if only they could secure certain materials. He'd drop hints about their dire financial straits, playing the victim, hoping to tug at my old maternal heartstrings. Mum, the stress is unbelievable. We're on the brink. One good lead could change everything. I would listen, nodding sympathetically, offering vague encouragement. It sounds very challenging, Stephen. Business can be so unforgiving. Still, you're a resourceful young man. I'm sure you'll find what you need. Remember what Grandpa always said about patience? Then, I'd offer another small, misleading crumb. He used to collect strange little pebbles, smooth, almost black, near that old oak tree that looks like a leaning giant. Said they had a certain feel to them. I knew that old oak tree. It was miles from the actual vein, a landmark on the edge of the property that led nowhere important. The pebbles, just ordinary river stones, but in their minds, desperate for a treasure map. These irrelevant details became vital clues. I pictured them, out in the woods they hadn't cared about since childhood, digging through muddy creek beds and sifting through loose soil, driven by the lure of my whispered gold. It was a cold satisfaction, watching them scramble, their greed now their guiding light. Every strained smile, every desperate question, was a testament to the power of a secret they thought they could exploit, but which I was meticulously controlling. How long could they chase a ghost? And what would they become when they finally realized the true nature of their pursuit? Their masks of concern had not just cracked, they had shattered, revealing the raw, ugly hunger simmering beneath, now boiling over. The air in my small room at Serenity Gardens, usually thick with quiet, now vibrated with their barely contained agitation. Stephen and Brenda's weekly visits, once laced with feigned affection, had morphed into interrogations. The expensive chocolates and cashmere shawls were distant memories, replaced by clipped questions and eyes that no longer searched for charm, but for the exact location of the treasure they believed I stubbornly withheld. Mum, this isn't a game, Stephen snapped, his voice sharp, devoid of any pretense of care. He was a caged animal, pacing my small space, his expensive loafers scuffing rhythmically on the polished linoleum. His phone, a constant extension of his hand, buzzed with unheard calls, each vibration a tangible echo of his mounting financial stress. We've been out to that old property 3 times now. The creek, the old oak tree. We've found nothing but mud, overgrown weeds, and some rusted-out soda cans. His jaw was tight, a vein throbbing faintly in his temple. Brenda sat stiffly on the guest chair, her arms crossed over her chest like a shield, a dark scowl marring her usually composed face. Her meticulously applied makeup seemed to slip, revealing faint lines of exhaustion and frustration. The charming facade had completely fallen away. "Patience, darling," I murmured, my voice a deliberate, almost soothing contrast to their escalating tension. I continued folding a freshly laundered scarf, my movements slow and precise, relishing the visible irritation my calmness caused them. Some treasures aren't easily found. The earth keeps her secrets, doesn't she? Secrets? Or a wild goose chase? Brenda's voice was a whip crack, cutting through the thin air. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing, fixed on mine with an intensity that bordered on accusation. "Are you just enjoying this, Meredith? Watching us run around, hoping for something you know isn't there? Making us look foolish?" The raw accusation in her tone was a vindication. They truly thought I was doing this out of malice, rather than a deeper purpose. A quiet, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. "Now why would I do that, Brenda? I merely shared a childhood memory, a little adventure your father-in-law and I had, a tale of youthful discovery." I let out a soft, almost innocent sigh, as if reminiscing. "If you choose to invest your time in it, if you choose to believe in childhood stories, that's entirely your decision. I merely painted a picture, dear." My words, though simple, were laced with an icy calm that seemed to irritate them further, their frustration visibly mounting. They hated my control, my lack of desperation. Stephen stopped pacing abruptly, planting himself directly in front of me, his tall frame casting a long shadow across my lap. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were now wide with a desperate plea. "Mum, please. Our business is dying. You know this. We're bleeding money. We need a break. We need something big, something real. If there's any truth to this, any tangible information beyond reddish rocks and black pebbles, you need to tell us. Now." His voice dropped to a low, urgent growl, tinged with a desperation I hadn't heard from him since his college days, when he was begging for tuition money. "Don't play games with us, Mum. Not now. We're past that." I met his gaze directly, my eyes unwavering. The fear in his eyes was palpable, a cold, desperate fear, but it was overshadowed by a consuming, almost terrifying greed. This was the moment. This was the peak. Their desperation had stripped away every last shred of civility, revealing the naked avarice beneath. "Perhaps," I said softly, my voice barely a whisper, yet it seemed to echo in the charged silence. "The value isn't in what you expect to find, but in what it truly is. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight, if one only has eyes to see." Their faces, contorted with a mixture of confusion and intensified avarice, locked onto mine. They were so close to breaking, so utterly desperate for the answer they believed I held. The room felt thick with unspoken demands, a silent battle of wills. They had discarded me as a burden, then sought to exploit me as a resource. Now they were practically begging for a handout, disguised as a long-lost secret. It was a mirror held up to their own souls, reflecting an ugliness they refused to acknowledge. They craved the gold, the easy fix, but they had no idea the real treasure was the profound, life-altering lesson they were about to learn. What happens when the truth you deliver is far more valuable than the lie someone believed, but not in the way they ever imagined? Their desperate pleas hung heavy in the air, a final, suffocating demand for the gold they craved. But I held the true answer, far more valuable and utterly unexpected. Stephen leaned in, his face contorted. "Mum, please. No more riddles. Just tell us, where is it? Where's the real mine?" Brenda, usually so composed, wrung her hands, her eyes wide with a frantic anticipation that bordered on madness. We're losing everything, Meredith. You have to tell us. The desperation was a stench in the room, a raw, ugly hunger. I met their frantic gazes. My own eyes calm, steady. I reached under my pillow, pulling out the antique wooden box. The brass clasps gleamed under the room's fluorescent light, their eyes fixated on it, trembling with barely contained avarice. I opened it slowly, deliberately, the soft creak of the lid echoing the tension in the room. Then, I pulled out the yellowed, hand-drawn map. "This is it," I said, my voice quiet but piercing through their desperate clamour. I held it out, not for them to take, but for them to see. The gold mine. It's exactly where I told you. Near Bear's Claw Creek, by the leaning giant oak, where the reddish rock appears. Stephen snatched the map, his fingers tearing slightly at the fragile parchment. He squinted at it, then at me, confusion warring with frustration. "This is just the same childish drawing. Mum, we need answers, not fairy tales." Brenda groaned, turning away in disgust. "This is insane. You're playing games, Meredith." I smiled, a cold, knowing curve of my lips. "Oh, it's no fairy tale, dear ones. And I'm playing no game. The gold was never the point, not literally." I watched their faces, the confusion deepening, then the first flicker of irritation. "Think, Stephen. Think of what your company truly needs. Those rare materials, the ones for your high-tech manufacturing, that obscure raw earth mineral you can't source." Stephen froze. His eyes, initially clouded with frustration, widened, a DMN, dawning horror, slowly replacing the anger. Brenda spun back, her jaw dropping. The mine?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Exactly," I affirmed, my voice gaining strength, each word a hammer blow. "The gold mine. It contains a vast deposit of a rare earth mineral. Not literally gold, no, but far more valuable to your failing business. A solution to all your financial woes, hidden in plain sight." Just like I said, the air left the room. Stephen's face drained of all colour, the map falling uselessly from his hand to the linoleum floor. Brenda staggered back, pressing a hand to her mouth, her eyes fixed on me, not with greed, but with shock and a terrible realization. They had been so consumed by the idea of gold, they had missed the true, life-saving treasure, blinded by their own self-serving perception. The silent shame in their eyes was more potent than any shout, and for the first time, they saw not a burden, but the woman who held their entire future in her hands. What price do we pay when our greed blinds us to the very answers we seek? And how do we truly confront the ugliness we find within ourselves? The silence in my room, usually a comfort, now throbbed with the raw, exposed nerves of Stephen and Brenda, their desperate pleas for gold shattered by the truth of a different, far more profound treasure. Stephen stood frozen, the tattered map fluttering to the linoleum, his face a canvas of disbelief, then a sickening, demon recognition. Brenda, hands still clamped over her mouth, swayed slightly, as if the very air had been sucked from her lungs. Their eyes, once blazing with avarice, now held a desolate, awful clarity. "A rare earth mineral?" Stephen finally choked out, his voice thin, almost unrecognizable. But the gold mine, Mom. You said..." He gestured feebly at the crumpled map on the floor, as if trying to grasp at the shattered illusion. The words caught in his throat, each one heavy with the weight of his own blindness. "I said gold mine," I corrected gently, my voice calm but unwavering, because that's what a child's excited heart saw decades ago, and because I knew it was the only word that would cut through your preoccupations. Your business, Stephen, has been hemorrhaging money trying to find these exact components, hasn't it? The obscure raw materials you've been grumbling about for months? The impossible supply chains? I watched his eyes narrow, the last vestiges of denial crumbling under the cold, undeniable truth. Brenda's whispered plea was barely audible. We've spent a fortune, searching for nothing but mud and old pebbles. We almost put the last of our capital into securing a loan for overseas suppliers for this exact mineral. And it was there, under our noses, all along? Her voice cracked, not with anger now, but with the profound shock of lost opportunity, of their own monumental folly. It was always there, I confirmed, my gaze sweeping between them, just as I was always here, waiting, giving. And you were so busy looking for the shine of what you thought was valuable. You missed the true wealth, the real solutions, the very foundation of your legacy. My words were not a lash, but a mirror, forcing them to confront the ugliness of their greed and neglect. You were ready to discard me, just as you were ready to overlook the very thing that could save you, because neither fit neatly into your narrow definition of value. Stephen slowly knelt, picking up the map. His fingers traced the faded lines. But this time, he saw not a child's fantasy, but the blueprint to his future. His eyes welled up, not with tears of frustration, but of a deep, wrenching shame. Mum, I don't know what to say. We were so caught up, so desperate. We didn't see you. We just saw a problem, a burden. His voice was raw, stripped of all pretense. Brenda, tears silently tracking paths through her makeup, nodded, unable to speak, the weight of their betrayal suffocating her. No, I corrected softly, my voice firm. You saw what you chose to see, just as I allowed myself to be seen as a burden for too long. I paused, letting the words sink in. This wasn't just about the mineral. It was about shifting the entire foundation of our relationship. Now, we have a choice. You can continue to see me as the old woman you tried to lock away, or you can see me as the woman who just handed you the key to your future. The gold is there, but its true value is in how we use it. Together. A week passed, a heavy, silent negotiation conducted not through words, but through actions. Stephen and Brenda returned, not with gifts, but with a binder, thick with geological reports they'd hastily commissioned, confirming the rare earth mineral deposits. They spoke to me with a newfound reverence, a quiet deference that was startling. Mum, Stephen began one afternoon, his voice low, earnest. He stood by my window, no longer pacing, but still, almost hesitant. Brenda sat beside me, her hand resting lightly, tentatively on my arm. We've had a team out there. The estimates, they're astronomical. This isn't just enough to save the business. It's enough to redefine our entire industry. He paused, taking a deep breath. But it's your land, your discovery. And we need your guidance, your wisdom. I looked at Brenda, her face etched with exhaustion, but also a fragile hope. Meredith, she whispered, her voice husky. We were wrong. About everything. We were so blind. Please forgive us. We need you. Not just for the mine, but for us. For family. I studied their faces, seeing not just the lingering traces of their ambition, but also a genuine, hard-won humility. It wasn't about the money anymore, not entirely. It was about realizing the depth of their folly, the value of what they'd almost thrown away. Forgiveness, I stated slowly, is earned, not given lightly. But trust can be rebuilt, on new foundations. I looked from Stephen to Brenda, my eyes holding theirs. I have conditions. This mineral isn't just a commodity to be exploited for profit. It's a legacy. My legacy. And it will be used not just to save your business, but to build something lasting, something with integrity. Their immediate, fervent nods were all the confirmation I needed. We laid out the terms, a fair share for me, not just financially, but in decision-making power. A significant portion of the profits would go towards establishing a foundation for elderly care, ensuring no other person would be discarded like I had been. And most importantly, I would return to my home, my roses, my own life, with their genuine support, not their grudging tolerance. This wasn't a truce. It was a new beginning. Slowly, meticulously, we began to rebuild. The company, once teetering on the brink, found new life, soaring to unprecedented heights as they leveraged the rare mineral. Stephen, once distant and calculating, sought my counsel, not just on business matters, but on life. He even spent weekends with me, helping tend the rose garden, asking about Grandpa's stories, actually listening. Brenda, softened by the ordeal, became a true ally, calling not just out of obligation, but out of genuine affection, discussing her day, sharing small joys. She even helped me arrange an antique writing desk in my sunroom, a quiet nod to my rediscovered intellectual life. My old home, once filled with the silence of abandonment, now echoed with purposeful activity, and sometimes the genuine laughter of family. The antique box, still on my dresser, was no longer a symbol of hidden power, but a quiet reminder of lessons learned. It wasn't about the gold, or the mineral, or even the power. It was about seeing clearly, seeing the worth in others, and recognizing your own. I wasn't just a beneficiary of their success. I was the architect of their redemption. We had saved more than a business. We had saved a family, teaching them that true wealth wasn't found in a mine, but in the unbreakable bonds of collaboration, respect, and love. The weight of those initial lilies, heavy with unspoken goodbyes, had long since lifted, replaced by the vibrant bloom of a new understanding. This journey, from betrayal to triumphant return, showed me that it's never too late to reclaim your power, to rewrite your story, and to teach those you love the most profound lessons. What does true wealth mean to you? And how have you found your own hidden treasures? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Your voice matters to us. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales of transformation